vision.
Okay, can you pull over towards the side over there? You know what? This person right here. Hold up. Can we get this person in here? Oh my God. Baby, this is horrible.
Yeah, hold on. Try it now.
Oh my God.
We can't go yet. So we can't go yet.
Austin!
Carter Evans is following that part of the story. Carter?
Anthony, you could just imagine what the triage must have been like. Ambulances arriving one after the other. In all, more than 500 patients were transferred to local hospitals, but not all of the critically wounded arrived in an ambulance.
In the chaos, confused concertgoers ran in any direction they could, over walls, on top of each other, and into hotel lobbies, just trying to get out of the line of fire.
What is it?
Be advised, it is automatic fire, fully automatic fire from an elevated position. Take cover.
Gail Davis was at the concert.
This girl had been standing right beside me, and she had fallen, and first she stood there and she grabbed her stomach. She looked at her hands are bloody, and she just kind of screamed and she just fell back.
Concertgoers who were not injured became first responders, moving victims in wheelbarrows, office chairs, and hotel luggage carts. Tom McIntosh was shot in the leg when a stranger stopped the bleeding and drove him to the emergency room in the back of a truck.
You're surrounded by, thousands of people. You don't know who's shooting at you. It's pretty stressful. You got guys like, you gotta keep moving, helping me, keep me focused, and I'm trying to keep my life moving.
More than 100 gunshot victims poured into University Medical Center, according to trauma surgeon Jay Coates.
These patients, with so many coming in so fast, we did what's called damage control, which is really just stopping the process of dying.
Move on to the next one.
Got the next one in, and we did that all night.
By morning, more than 50 people from the Route 91 concert were dead, like 29-year-old Sonny Melton from Tennessee, Rachel Parker from Manhattan Beach, California, and Charleston Hartfield, a Las Vegas cop who coached youth football. Hundreds more survived, and with hospitals running short on resources, they put out a plea for blood. Jeff Coe was one of many who stood in line to donate.
This is a small thing, right? But you look outside and there's all kinds of people that want to donate. They're going to get blood as much as they need.
This is University Medical Center. It's the only level 1 trauma center in the state. Last night, they took in 104 patients. Now, 4 of them died. 12 are still in critical condition. But Anthony, 40 have already been treated and released.
Paul Violas. Paul, I want you to get right into it because I understand you have some new information about the suspect's father. What do you know?
Yeah, Stephanie. So I've confirmed this with the most valid and reliable source that I have with the FBI, and my source tells me and confirmed that the subject's father was in fact a serial bank robber.
Okay.
Which speaks a lot to the genetics of this. Who spent 8 years on the FBI's most wanted list after escaping from prison.
He escaped from prison after being convicted of armed bank robbery.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
This was in the 60s?
Yeah, I don't have dates on it.
Okay.
Right, but that was confirmed through my source with the FBI. So when you start breaking this down, as we were talking about earlier, when you start breaking this down, genetics is one part of it, but just going back forensically to the way he was brought up, how he was raised, who raised him, and then going forward into his employment, et cetera, this is a key part in how behavioral analysts are going to look at this particular shooter and deciding what really was the impetus behind the shooting.
Do you think this is the most significant clue we have thus far?
So far, that's been made public, yes. I would say no question.
Okay, and again, the suspect is 64-year-old Stephen Paddock, who killed himself before the cops were able to enter his hotel room. He had at least 10 guns with him, and it seems like this was a much pre-planning was required for him to get the guns up there, for him to choose the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. What does that tell us?
Well, again, you know, he chose this particular venue for a reason. When he checked in, he specifically asked for a room facing where the concert was
Apparently,
going to
he
play.
actually asked for 2 rooms.
2 rooms,
yeah.
right? And both in that particular, overlooking that particular area. He has 10 long guns, right? So now he's going to break these down into suitcases, and he's got to bring them up to his room. Doubtfully checked in with them all at one time.
Because these are heavy, heavy guns, right?
No question. I mean, and you've got 10 of them, and you're not even counting the ammunition. You know, the hundreds and hundreds of rounds of ammunition that he brought up there. And we still don't know how much he didn't even get off because the police were sharp enough to get him, take care of this expeditiously.
But you're saying hundreds and hundreds of rounds because we actually have witness video and we can hear the relentless gunfire. Now,
right.
I was listening to the police dispatches that were happening at this time, and they described it as automatic gunfire. I want to ask you about the weapons because we haven't had any confirmation of what weapons he used. But could anything other than a fully automatic weapon create that ricochet, that kind of rapid fire?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so we're talking about an automatic machine gun.
There's no question that he was using an automatic rifle. There's no question about that.
Okay.
None whatsoever.
There are 2 crime scenes involved. There are the 2 hotel rooms that he was at the Mandalay Bay Hotel, but there's also where the shooting happened, which was basically across the street diagonal. It was actually, when you look at it from a map, surprisingly far. That's how powerful these weapons were.
Right. You've got the Mandalay Bay here, and then you got about 400 yards off is the area where the concert was. So he's 32 stories up. His trajectory is shooting down 400 yards into a pool of people. So there was no question how premeditated this thing was.
When we look also at the fact that this was a 3-day concert, but this was the moment he chose to open fire, the moment when Jason Aldean, the big country music star of the entire festival, that's when he chooses to open fire. What does that tell you?
He was looking for maximum effect. You figure if you pick the most, especially in a music event like this, more people are going to be at that headliner performance, and that's why exactly he waited for that particular time. I mean, no one can say for sure, but it clearly indicates the reason why he waited was for maximum effect.
One of the things that people have really honed in on is that he was this 64-year-old retiree that doesn't usually fit the profile of, especially given that he had, from what we know, no history of mental illness. At least he'd never been institutionalized from what we know so far.
Right.
And he had no record with the police. And, some have said, well, that's a mature enough age to have grappled with whatever issues you have. What do you say to that?
Right, but remember something, Stephanie. Just because he doesn't have a criminal record doesn't mean he doesn't have a criminal past. So with respect to the investigation, Las Vegas PD is going to go to where there's 2 points here, go to where he currently was living, but also remember, he hasn't been living there for a long period of time. He moved from Florida. You can bet they're going to go to Florida and they're going to start interviewing people there to really find out more about him at that particular point. There's a lot of information that still has to be uncovered.
What is the difference between somebody that is reactive and does something in sort of a so-called crime of passion versus the psychology of somebody that premeditates, plans over a period of time, something like this, which is, let's call it what it is. This is mass murder.
Right. And go ahead, I'm sorry.
What's the distinction, as we try to piece together who this man was?
For viewers to really understand the kind of person we're dealing with, and in answer to your question, a crime of passion is immediate. It's an immediate fix to what someone sees in front of them, normally acting with an adrenaline rush where they're tunnel visioned and they're really not thinking straight. And then when the tunnel vision goes away and they sit back and look what they've done, then of course that's more of the example of a crime of passion. It's an immediate fix, an immediate solution to an incident right in front of them. What we're talking about here was clearly premeditated, the planning involved in that, but it's also, from a behavioral side, typically shooters like this want attention. They want to make a statement. They want to be heard. I think you're probably going to find, as you drill down in this particular profile of this man, as they start to uncover more and more about him, that this guy was screaming for attention. There was a message he wanted to get across. That's why he picked this great event. That's why he picked the absolute maximum time of that event for, to achieve what he did by having the most people there.
In cold blood,
no question. Complete coward.
Paul Violas, thank you so much for sharing.
National security threat tied to this attack, and at this point they don't see any links between this shooter and any foreign terrorist organizations, despite the fact that ISIS has tried to take credit for the attack. Now, one of the most significant developments in the investigation so far is the fact that investigators have been able to execute search warrants, both at the suspect's home and in his hotel room. That's significant because at first they were having to take their time before they could execute those warrants. There were concerns about safety for the investigators, any potential booby traps like what we saw in San Bernardino, because sometimes we see with these attacks, these attackers plan sort of a second phase or a second act at their home and can booby trap their home, their car, and in this case a hotel room. But investigators were able to get into the house. They say they weren't really able to find anything that really speaks to motive, but they have taken some objects out of that home that they will continue to examine. They also got into the hotel room where, as they have said, they found that the shooter had at least 10 rifles. They're also taking some evidence that they will continue to examine from the hotel room. But still, Stephanie, at this point, no clear answer on what motivated this attack.
Tell me where it is going from here, and clearly a lot of challenges because this suspect did not have a criminal record. He really wasn't on the books.
That's right. And from here, as the investigators have said, they have taken some objects both from his hotel room and from his home.